Welcome back to my video of programming with objects. In the previous session, we have discussed about writing data into the output and reading from the input. Then how to format various data in according to our wish, and how to autobox and unbox. What is autoboxing and unboxing in Java? Now, in today's class, we will discuss about classes and objects, about constructors, methods, and parameter passing. So, as we know, Java is a object-oriented programming language. So, being an object-oriented programming language, everything in Java will be written inside a class. So, if any program you take, it will be present inside a class. We must make use of a class to encapsulate our logic. So, whatever concept we wish to implement must be encapsulated within a class. So, this class is something which is a data type that is used to define the object, or the class can be used to create an object, and thus the class provides a template or a structure for how an object must look like. So this class can contain many various members. These members may be variables or they may be methods. And always when we declare a class, we will declare a class by the use of keyword class. And once the class is created, to make use of it, we have to create an object of the class. So object is an instance of the class, and class is the blueprint or the template of an object. Whenever an object is being created, some memory will be allocated for that particular object. So, and as I've told you, this class may contain various variables and various members. So each object created will have its own variable and method of that particular class. So if we are creating 3 objects for a particular class, each of these 3 objects will make use of these members of that class. So of that class. Now, any program which will be the first program to be executed in Java will be the main method. So the class which we have to execute first should contain the main method, and main is the starting point of your program. But not all applications need a main method. Applets does not use main method. And when we are creating an object, we must declare a variable of that class type that can refer to an object. And to create an object, we make use of the new operator. The new operator will create the object dynamically, and it will allocate space at runtime. It allocates memory at runtime for that objects. Now, this is the basic structure of a class. We have the class keyword followed by the class name. Then it can have various these are the members. So these variables are called as instance variables. The data or the variables defined inside the class are called as instance variables, and the methods, it can also contain various methods. So the methods are they are the instance methods. So they together, the instance variables, the variables, and the methods together form the members of the class. So when you define a variable, you have to specify the type of that variable, and we should assign a name for that. This is the name of that variable, and this is the type of the variable. Similarly, when you look into the method, this method has a return type, then the name of the method, and it can have the parameters passed to it. So they both together are embedded inside the class, which is declared by the keyword class. Now, when we want to create an object of the class, we use these statements. We may use either this statement or these two statements together. These two statements put together is the first one. So what we are doing, we are creating an object of box class. So this is the class. So it will be class name, object name is equal to new class name. So this is the way by which we define an object. So we have to specify the class name, the object name, new keyword, and the class name followed by parenthesis. When this statement is executed, an object named mybox is created. Okay, mybox will be created, and whatever members are available inside that class box will be applicable for this mybox. The same split separately gives this form wherein we are creating a reference to the object. So we are creating a reference to the object, and here we are allocating the memory to the box object. We are allocating the box object. Now this is the general form of the method wherein you have the type, which is the return type of the object, the name of the method, which can be the function name. It may or may not have the parameter list, and the body of the method. Now, if this method is returning some value back to the call function, then you have to use the return statement. And this whatever is the type of the data type of this value, or whatever the return type, has to be specified as this part. So the type indicates the return type of that object. Name is the function name or the method name. Then the list of parameters passed to it, the body, and it may, or if that function is returning any value, then it has to use the return type. Now, if that method doesn't return any value, then we have to use void. We use void in case the method doesn't return any value. Now, let's look into an example of using class. We are creating a class named box. That box is having three variables of type double, which is width, height, and depth. So this box is having three instance variables: width, height, and depth. Now we are making use of this class in another class. So another class is created which contains the main method. So when we want to access the members of the box class, we have to create an object of that particular class. That means we have to create an object of box class inside the main method. Since this main method is present outside it is not within the class box. Now, so we always have to create an object when we are trying to access any members of the class. So from the box demo class, we are trying to make use of the box object. So since we are making use of this box object, we have to create an object. So we are creating an object. So when this object is created in the memory, it will create an it will allocate space for my box object. Since this my box is an object of box class which contains three variables, three locations will be given to it. Then we are defining a variable to find volume of this particular box. Now we are assigning some values to these instance variables. So for this my box, the width of the my box is set to 10. So let's say we have this width, height and depth. So we have height, width, height and depth. So we have width is assigned to 10. So we have 10 stored over here. Height is given as 20 and depth is set to 15. Now we are finding the volume by extracting these three values and finding the product of them. So finally we get some value stored into volume, which is 3000. By multiplying all these three numbers, we get 3000, which is stored into volume. So if we want to extract any value from the object, we have to use the object name dot the variable name. So this is how we are creating an object. So whenever an object is being created, a memory will be allocated for it, and we can store the values into it, and we can retrieve the values from that object. After performing the product, we are displaying that volume as displaying the content as volume, the product of height, width and depth. Now, in the previous case, we had only single object. Now, there may be cases wherein we have to create multiple objects of the same class. And we have to perform the same method multiple times. So, same work multiple times. So, instead of repeating the code every time, we can make use of methods. So, here we are creating two objects. And these two objects are, we have to find the volume of these two objects. So we have to find the volume, and we have to set the dimensions of these methods. So we can so to set values, we don't have to repeat these three lines for every object. Instead of that, we can make use of the methods which will do the same set of steps repeatedly. So if we have a set of steps repeated for different objects, then we can make use of methods. So here we are creating two objects, myBox1 and myBox2. Then for myBox1, we are setting the dimensions. So what happens here? The set dimension is used to set some values to its objects. In this method also, we are making use of the box class, same box class, which has width, height and depth as its instance variables, and we have to assign some values to these instance variables. So to set values to those instance variables, we are passing some parameter to it. We are passing 10, 20 and 15 to the set dimension method. So what will it do? The set dimension method will, we are calling this set dimension method on myBox1. So for when we create these two things, it will create two parts. This is myBox1 and this is the object myBox2. So on the execution of these two objects, on the execution of these two statements, two objects will be created, myBox1 and myBox2, with three variables. And we are calling the setDime method on myBox1. So setDime will set these value to myBox1. So this is width, height and depth. So to 10, this 10 will be assigned to myBox1's width. See here, this 10 is passed to W, 20 is passed to H and 15 is passed to depth D. So, and inside that method, whatever value was obtained in W has been assigned into width. So, myBox1's width will be stored 10. Then, so initially for myBox1, this was 10, 20 and 15. So on to myBox1's width, 10 will be stored. Then myBox1's height, 20 will be stored. And on to depth, 15 will be stored. So now this is being set. Now again we are calling on mybox2 the setDime method. So it will set 3, 6 and 9 as width, height and depth. So here when 3 is taken into W, 6 is taken into H and 9 is taken into D. So 3 will be stored into width. So we get 3 here. Then 6 is stored into height. So we get 6 here. And 9 is stored into this. So these are all width, height and depth. This is also width, height and depth. So we have initialized these these box objects to some values. Now we have to find the volume of these two objects. So we are calling the volume method. To the volume method, we are not passing any value, but we are calling that volume method for on mybox1. So what will happen? The volume method will extract the values of width, height and depth from the mybox object. That means it will take 10, 20 and 15 and find the product. 10, 20 and 15 is taken, extracted. The product is found and it will be returned to the called object. So here we are, this height, width and depth are of double type. Hence the product also will be of double type. So we are specifying the return type as double. Now this value will be stored into volume. So here we will get 3000. Now similarly for we have the same thing for mybox2. So this volume in the case of mybox2, it will extract these values 3, 6 and 9 and then the product will be obtained. So it will 3, 6 and 9 will be extracted and the product will be obtained and that value will be returned to the called function, that is the main. So volume return 162 to this method 162. So you get 162 into volume and that will be displayed. Here you get it as 3000. So this is how the classes, methods and object work. Next is constructor. So in the previous method, in the previous thing, we have seen how we are using the setDime method to initialize the object. Now instead of making use of a method, we have a concept called as constructor in Java, which will initialize the object at the time of creation. So the constructor is used to initialize an object when that object is being created, or when that object is being created. If we have the constructor specified, then it will initialize the object. So this constructor will have the same name as that of the class, and it is resides in that same class. So a constructor will always, so if we are in the previous case, we had an class named box. So the constructor of the box or constructor of that class also will be box. So it should always have the same name as that of the class, and that constructor will be called automatically when you are whenever that object is created, the constructor will be called automatically. And the implicit return type of the class of that constructor is the class itself. Then a default there is something called as default constructor, which will be called if the user doesn't specify any constructor in that class. So Java will be always calling a default constructor. The compiler will automatically create and call the default constructor if we don't specify any constructor for that class. So this constructor may be with it may and may not have arguments. So it may be a constructor without an argument, or it may be a parameterized constructor. So if the user is not specifying any constructor on its own, then only the Java will invoke the default constructor. If the user is specifying any constructor for that program, then this default constructor will not be invoked. So these are the three types of constructors we have. a default constructor which will be called in case none of these are specified by the user. And no argument constructor is the one which contains no arguments, which will be an empty constructor. And we have parameterized constructor which will take some values to it. So let's look into the example of constructor. In this case, here also we are using a class box with the 3 instance variables, width, height and depth. This is our empty constructor, or a constructor without any argument. So this is the structure of the constructor. Since our class is named box, our constructor also will be of name box. So this constructor will be invoked whenever that object is being created. So whenever that object is created, this constructor will be invoked. Now what are we doing in this constructor? In the previous case, we had used a method to initialize these values. So here, this being an empty constructor or a constructor without any arguments, we are setting the values of these variables to something inside the constructor. So here we are setting the values of width, height and depth to integer 10. We are assigning 10 into these variables. So width, height and depth. So when this object is being created, so what happens at this line? We are creating an object. So when we create my box object, it will width, height and depth. So once this object is created, at this point, this is creating an allocating space for it. So at this point, the constructor will be invoked. This constructor will be invoked, and this constructor will print constructing box in the output, and it will assign 10 to the height, width and depth. Now similarly, in the second case also, we are creating my box 2. So another space will be allocated with width, height and depth. So this also is making use of the constructor. It will assign 10 to each of its variables. Now once these objects are created, we are calling the method volume. So the method volume, as we have seen before, it is retrieving when we are creating on when we are calling it on my box 1, it will retrieve the values, these values, and use it here to find the volume, and it will display 1000 as output. So that you will get the volume is 1000. Similarly, when it is called over my box 2, the volume will be the volume method is called on my box 2. It will again retrieve the values of my box 2 and find the product and return it to this, and it will be displayed as in the output. So next, let's look into the parameterized constructor. In the previous example, we have discussed about the no argument constructor. Now in this case, we are creating a parameterized constructor. So in the parameterized constructor, we can pass parameters to it. We are passing some value which has to be initialized for that object at the time of creation of that object. So we are passing some values at the time of creation. So what will happen here? Here we are this box is the constructor. Since the class is also box, this is the constructor, and into that constructor we are passing these values. So we are passing these values, and those values has to be taken into some arguments, and that argument is assigned into the variables of that particular class of that instance. So we have my box 1. My box 1 object is created. So when you create my box 1, these values are being passed to this constructor. So 10 will be taken into W, 20 will be taken into H, and 15 will be taken into D. And these W, H and D is stored into width, height and depth. So this will store 10, this will store 20, and this will store 15. So here we get 10, 20 and 15. So at this point, we will create an object, my box 1, with 10, 20 and 15 as its values. So here this is making use of a parameterized constructor. In the same way, we are creating another object, mybox2, which will again create spaces for it. mybox2. So we have width, height and depth. Width, height and depth. So we are passing 3, 6 and 9 to it. So the initializing values are 3, 6 and 9. So 3 will come to W, 6 will come to height and D will come to 9. And these W, H and D are stored into width, height and depth. So width will be 3, height will be 6, and depth will be 9. So here width, this is for my box 2. So width will be 3, height will be 6 and depth will be 9. Now these two objects are created. Again we are calling the method volume on mybox1 and mybox2. So when the method volume is called over mybox1, it will extract these values into, these values are extracted, it will find the product and it will be stored into volume. 3000 will be stored into volume and that is being displayed. Similarly, 3 into 6 into 9, when mybox 2 is, when volume is called over mybox 2, the product of these numbers are, calculated and that is stored into volume and displayed over here. So this is how parameter constructor works. So the default constructor will be called when no explicit constructor is specified in the program, and the user may explicitly give a constructor which may be either a argumentless or empty constructor, and or it may be a constructor with some parameters passed to it. Next, let's look how these arguments can be passed. In every programming language, the parameters may be passed as value or as reference. It may be passed as a value or as reference. So if it is a call by value procedure, then a copy of that value will be passed on to the formal parameter. So the method will copy the value of the argument into the formal parameter of the method. Whereas if it is called by reference, then a reference is being passed to the argument. Here in call by value, there may not, even if we make changes on the parameters, it will not reflect onto the actual parameters. It will not reflect over the on the actual parameters. Whereas in call by reference, whatever changes we make in the argument will be reflected onto the actual argument, since it is passed as a reference. Now in Java, whenever we are passing objects, they are always passed by references. The objects are passed to methods by references. So if we make any change to the object inside the method, then that will be affecting the object used as an argument. So if when we pass an object, say A is an object which value 10 is being passed to a method, say M, and inside M this object A is being reassigned as 20, then the value of the object will be changed to 20. It will be overwritten. So whatever, since object is being passed as a reference, whatever changes we make on the object will be reflected on the actual argument. So let's look into an example of parameter passing. Here we have a class named test. We have a class named test with its instance variables A and B. This is the constructor for test, which is initializing A and B values, which is being passed at the time of creation. And we have two methods, meth and increment by 10. This meth method doesn't return any data, so its return type is void, whereas increment by 10 is returning an object of class test Hence, its return type is test. Now, inside the main method is present inside another class, inside another class. So, since we have to access the test variables and methods, we have to create an object of test class. So, we are creating an object of test class. Since we are passing some parameters to it, this test class will invoke the parameterized constructor, which is available, which is present inside the test class. So, an object OB will be created with values I and j initialized to 15 and 20. Now we are printing those values. So if we want to access the object, if we want to access these members of that particular class, we have to use the object name followed by that particular member. So we will print this statement. So we are accessing that particular objects A. So here it will be A and B. Sorry, this will be A and B. When this object is created, an object with value A will be set to 15 and B will be set to 20. So object.A will be extracted from here and displayed as 15, and object.B will be, ob.b will be taking this value 20 and displaying it. So whenever we want to access any member of that particular object or class, we have to create an object and access it with the dot operator. Object followed by dot with the member name. Now, now we are calling the method on object. So we are passing this object. This object OB is passed to the method. So since the OB is an object itself, the OB is an object itself of test class, we have to, a formal argument also should be of test class, and we are reading it into a formal argument O. So the type of that argument is test, since this OB is of object type test, of class type test. So it also should be taken as an class test, and its type is class test, and this is the name of that argument. So what are we doing here? Now we have passed this object itself to the method meth. Now inside method we are changing the values of A and B. So O dot A is equal to, is multiplied by 2. So what happens? O dot A is what? 2. I mean O dot A is 15 initially. So that will be stored to 30. That will be stored to 30. And O dot B was 20, and we are dividing that by 2. So this will be changed to 10. So inside the we have passed the values by by reference. As a reference we are passing this. So whatever change we make on this object, whatever change we make on this object will be reflected over here. So initially we had stored 15 and 20 on it. Now this 15 and 20 is being changed by the method. So this method is multiplying the A value by 2 and dividing the B value by 2. So A value was initially 15. So when it is multiplied by 2, we get 30 there, and B value was initially 20, that we have dividing by 2. So the value will be 10 now. So that change is being made, and then we are displaying it after the call. After making the call, we are displaying it. So you get this statement in the output with ob.a and ob.b displayed. So ob.a is 30 and ob.b is 10. So from we are extracting ob.a as 30 and ob.b as 10. So these values are obtained over here. Next we are we are again creating an object. We are making some changes on the object, and we are returning it. So we are creating an object OB2, and to that OB2 we are to this OB2 we will be storing some storing the object OB after making some changes. So in this change is made by this increment by 10 method. So what is it doing? Since this increment by 10 method is returning some value, its return type will be, it is returning an object of temp, object name temp, which is of test class. This temp is of test class. So the return type of this method should be test. Then once it is called, OB is having the values 30 and 10 stored into it. So this value will be operated over here. This value will be operated over here. So what does temp contain? Temp will be creating a new object. Temp is a new object created with values A and B. Now what is A? What is A? A is 30 here. See, it is being called over OB. So on OB, increment by 10 is called. So when it is trying to access A, it will access OB's A. So OB's A was 30. So 30 plus OB's value was 30. So 30 plus 10 will be taken here. So 30 plus 10 will be taken and it will be 40. So this value will come to 40. Temp's A value is 40. Similarly, OB's B value is 10. So B plus 10 means it will come to 20. So this will be 20. So now this temp is of type class. Class type is test. This is of test class. And it is another object created over here by this method. Now this object is being transferred to, now this method is returning this temp. So that temp will be returned, here it will get temp, that temp is stored into OB2. So we have an OB2 reference created. Here we are creating a reference. So an OB2 reference will be created and that reference is pointing to temp. So when we try to access OB2.A, it is in turn accessing this object's A part, that's temp's A part. So OB2.A will be 40. OB2.A will be 40 and OB2.B will be 20. So here we are passing, in this case, we are returning the object, temporary object created inside this method to the main object. And that is being copied onto, that is being referred by the object reference OB2. So OB2 is a memory reference or an object reference and that is accessing it is made to point to temp. So when by OB2's using OB2 we can access the A and B values and we get the values which is being stored inside this object displayed over here. So OB2.A means we get here 40 and OB2.B is 20. So in today's class we have discussed about what is a class and objects and what are constructors. So as in Java we have everything will be implemented as classes, and if we want to access the members of the classes we have to create an object. So class is a blueprint of an object and object is an instance of class. To initialize any object we make use of the constructors, which may be either a default constructor or a parameterized or a non-parameterized constructor, and we can use methods within classes, which is again a member, and we can pass values to the methods by call by reference. Whenever an object is being passed, it is passing the data by call by reference. And these are the textbooks which I have referred for preparing the slides and the programs. I have mainly used the textbook Complete Reference by Herbert Schild for preparing the slides and video, for preparing this slides for this video. Thank you for listening to my session. We will continue with the next topics in the other session. Thank you for today.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.